So this, when I represent that this is happening in Pittsburgh, it is. But make no mistake, it's not simply because of the actions of city government or our administration. Counties involved, states involved. We're fortunate in Pittsburgh to have a great foundation community, from the Mellon Foundation to the Heinz Foundation, the Pittsburgh Foundation, all of which in many cases have invested in these projects. Corporate community that's supportive, nonprofits. So to make something like this happen, and if I pulled out my list of different funders or ways that these projects happen, the list is a very long one. Banks that really step up to the plate and allow Pittsburgh to do some unique things because we're so strong in that sector. And that's really why we've been able to, I think, put some of these things together on the economic development side. Economic development, while we are two separate governments right now, in many cases we work closely together. If a corporation, for example, is looking to come to Pittsburgh, of course I'd love to have them in the city limits. But if they make an argument on why it's important for them to be near the airport, we work with them to try to make that happen. Because it's better to have them near the airport, although it's not in the city, than it is for not to have them at all. And so we've taken that approach. That's my mindset. But that being said, someday I'm going to be gone. Someday the county executive is going to be gone. And if there are two other leaders in there that may not see eye to eye, it might be a different dynamic. And that's why we think the actual functional change, or structural change rather, should take place.
Mayor Ravenstahl, I'm actually a native Pittsburgher, and I have two questions for you. The first question is, how are you addressing the issue of many of the younger professionals who are choosing to leave the city of Pittsburgh and leaving you with a dwindling tax base? It's been a problem for more than 20 years now. Mm-hmm. The other question is, have you dealt with at all the feeling in some of the city's further flung neighborhoods and in some of the traditional African-American neighborhoods that you talked about, that economic development is not addressing the needs of people who live in those neighborhoods and have been there for some time?
Yes. First question is, surprisingly, our numbers show, although it is a perception that's different, our numbers show that we are actually retaining our young people at greater rates than cities like Boston and New York. The challenge that we face and why that population decline has occurred is because we have, in Allegheny County, the second oldest population anywhere in the country behind Miami-Dade County in Florida. So we are an older county. And so bottom line is folks are dying quicker than they're being born. So we're not necessarily losing young people. That's kind of a myth. How do we do it? Tax abatement programs, Pittsburgh technology centers, neighborhoods like Lawrenceville and those types of places, to create that quality of life and vibrancy. So I think our quality of life is something that young people appreciate, and that's the first side of it. The second side is having a job. I mean, let's be honest. I know friends of mine that have left because they can't find employment. They'd love to be in Pittsburgh. They'd love to come back. They'd do so tomorrow if they could have a good job that would be reasonable and they could make a living on. So we're working toward that end. I think many of the programs and policies I discussed are those that we've attempted to pursue. Secondly, in many of those predominantly African American areas, we have struggled to bring economic development, not because people aren't interested, but because it's tough. In a lot of those areas, there are crime issues that are significant. We focus a lot of attention on those. In many cases, we've followed the lead of our city council members in those districts to try to best address what needs to take place. Fortunately, now we have a couple of good council members in those respective areas that I think have a good vision on what needs to be done. We've invested in our Hill District community, for example, a tremendous amount of money. When we announced the community benefits agreement in conjunction with the arena, we committed in writing over $1 million to a grocery store. We committed to building a new YMCA. We committed a first source center for job hiring so people can come in and get trained for jobs. We're going to train them right there and make sure they're prepared. We committed to doing an entire Hill District master plan. And so the problem isn't that there's not an interest or the resources. It's just in some cases the problem is, folks, whether they're supermarkets that are just saying, I don't know if I want to build there yet. It just might not be right. And so we have to get them to that level where they're comfortable. In a lot of cases, unfortunately, it's crime. Unfortunately, it's just a sense of, is my investment going to be protected if I invest there? So we're trying to make sure we do everything we can. One of the things that's been important to me is diversity and having a city government that's reflective of the people of Pittsburgh. It didn't exist that way when I became the mayor. One of the things I'm most proud of in that regard is the fact that I named an African-American police chief and fire chief. First time in this city's history that's happened. We have an equal employment opportunity officer whose job is literally to go out into the African-American communities and recruit people to work as firemen, police officers, paramedics, because right now our numbers there are terrible. And so we're trying to put resources in place to address that comprehensively. And it's not easy. It's going to take time, but we're trying to put some resources in place to do just that.
First of all, I want to thank you for an absolutely exciting look at Pittsburgh and that revitalization. And we also are doing that as much as we can in Cleveland.
Good.
But I also wanted to ask you as a corollary, you said we could ask something else
Sure,
as well.
please.
A corollary to the public safety of all these neighborhoods that you are really trying to revitalize economically would also be the violence that happens through crime guns that enter into our neighborhoods. I want to applaud you for being part of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, one of 500 in our country.
Right.
And I guess my question in terms of stopping gun show loophole kinds of things, in terms of making sure those guns don't end up in the hands of criminals, juveniles, terrorist suspects,
Sure.
those kinds of things. How can you speak to that as a mayor of this huge endeavor?
Right.
And also, how would you, as a mayor, also be able to influence state legislators who are reluctant to deal with gun violence?
Great question. One of the most not one of the most, it's clearly the most difficult day that I had as mayor was on April 4th of this year when I got a phone call that 3 of our police officers were shot, killed, dead, similar to what we're seeing happen in Lakewood, Washington right now, from an illegal gun, an AK-47. And, going through that experience and talking to those families and just the gut-wrenching weeks that followed that were, tremendously difficult in many ways, and clearly was the most difficult part of being the mayor thus far. It is a problem. It's a problem in Pittsburgh. It's a problem in urban areas. The challenge that we face, and what's interesting is even if is the NRA. Let's put it out there. The NRA is very powerful, very influential, and have in many ways, protected the ability for one to bear arms. Hey, look, I support that. My brother and dad just got finished hunting on Monday, and I think that's fine. I don't think that should be something that we challenge. But there's a difference between that and a gun that's on a street in urban America. And we have attempted, will continue to attempt. The governor, to his credit, right after that tragic killing in Pittsburgh, had a press conference at the state capitol where he committed his effort to passing state legislation to get illegal guns out of the hands, straw purchasing, the like. It was voted down recently in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. So we'll continue to do what we can. Unfortunately, I don't want to be the pessimist, but our own leaders locally didn't step up after the tragic events of April 4th and weren't willing then to take the issue on, despite the fact that 3 of our police officers were murdered by an illegal gun. Even NRA members themselves differentiate and say that, oh yeah, well, we think those illegal guns should be, 90-some%, the polling data is incredible. Yet despite that, I don't understand why at the state level they can't differentiate. We've passed local reforms and local laws that unfortunately are trumped by state law.